What's up, Leafs fans, and welcome back to Leafs Digest. If you guys were with us last night or you've watched our post-game reaction, you saw that it quickly turned into a live reaction, almost breaking news sort of deal, with the Toronto Maple Leafs having traded Nick Ritchie and a conditional second-round pick, which is essentially, it is a third in 2023 or a second in 2025, up to the choice of the Arizona Coyotes. And in return, we get back Ryan Dzingel and defenseman Ilya Lyubushkin, and to this point, that is still the best way that I can figure out how to enunciate his last name. So I'm just going to ride with that one until I find out that it's wrong. But I mean, we wanted to come on here and actually go into an in-depth breakdown. If you were watching live with us yesterday, we did our best to break it down on the fly, learn about some of these transactions, how this might work, but we've taken some time, we've looked through the stats, we've read some articles, we've watched some film. We are here to break down to you guys what this exactly means for the Toronto Maple Leafs in the short term and in the long term for this team. But before we dive into all of that, I want to remind everyone we're on the road to 2,000 subscribers. If you're watching this right now, if you have not subscribed yet, make sure you hit that subscribe button and help the boys get to 2K. You can see we got the long hair rock, and we've promised you guys that we're going to be growing out our hair until the playoffs. And if we get to 2K before the start of the playoffs, we will be going mullets. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and help the boys get there. But enough of that goodie. We gave our initial immediate off-the-top reactions last night. You've had some time to digest this. We've learned a little bit more about what's going on, more about these players. What is your day after reaction to this Nick Ritchie trade?
I mean, from the very get-go, it was going to be a bit of addition through subtraction. You don't want Ritchie's contract anymore. And as much as I know you opened it up by saying, ideally you get a little bit back, a little bit more back for Nick Ritchie, but I mean, at this point, he was hardly even staying in our lineup day to day. And I know that the contract made it look worse, but our depth has been right on with the forwards. So he was really having trouble slotting in. I feel like offloading him and getting two guys that are like on rental deals who are going to be helpful, but not overbearing into what we've already built. I think it's perfect. We're just adding up the details right now. We know we're already a good team. I'm pretty much sitting at the exact same take here where I'm really excited to see Ilya Lyubushkin, the supposed Russian bear. I'm excited to get a guy with a bit of size and physical play on the back end. Again, another right-handed shot. That is just something we absolutely needed before playoffs. I love this from a ton of different angles. And it's funny, last night talking on the pod, we're trying to decide why would Arizona do this? You know what? We are swinging for the fences when you trade for Nick Ritchie. It could end up being okay. I don't think that the contract will ever make it look like value, but who knows? They'll have another guy with some term going into next season, or at least another year out of him. So that's a positive for Arizona, who seems to be holding on by just a thread right now in the NHL in terms of just remaining a team.
Yeah, honestly. I mean, we're looking at a situation where these guys are going to be playing in an arena for the next 3 years with less than 5,000 fans. It's not like they're really pushing those numbers anyways on a nightly basis, but still to have the max capacity be sitting at that, it's a little bit of an embarrassing factor for them as an organization, and they're not necessarily headed in the right direction, even with trade rumors surrounding them about potentially moving on from Jacob Chychrun. So it just looks like even going into that, things are headed down a darker path, and then you go and you trade two of these guys and take on Nick Ritchie. And I did see a tweet from Cap Friendly, which said, in essence, like, Nick Ritchie, the way that the Leafs structured his deal, they were only paying him a certain amount this year, and $3.3 million was left to be paid next year. And if Arizona decides to buy him out, it'll only cost them, it would reduce the cost from $3.3 million to $2.2 million. And then they tailed off the tweet, and this is entirely from Cap Friendly. I'm taking this from, so you can go and find this on there as well. They said, if Arizona do buy out Ritchie, they will essentially have bought a second-round pick for $1.45 million. So, I mean, even at this point, it's speculated that he might not even end up in Arizona next season as well. But I think one of the big things, and you talked about it, like, he wasn't playing for this Leafs team. He was playing for the Marlies here, and he was taking up $1.3 million of cap space for this season for a guy who's not even playing. A guy who's actually in your AHL system, not even like he's sitting in the stands. He's in the AHL, not even playing with you. So you move on from that 1.3 and you get back two serviceable players who actually have been playing NHL games all season long, have a little bit of value, and on top of all that, which we'll get into, but you get back a big right-handed defenseman who's a physical guy and is a defensive defenseman, which is what this team needs. But kind of before we even get to there, I think one of the biggest things to stress when evaluating this trade and determining how good of a job Dubas and the management here has done on this one thing we really need to remember when you are evaluating this is that Not only did we get rid of Nick Ritchie for this season and we alleviate ourselves of that contract of a guy who's not playing here, and we get these two guys back who, as you mentioned, are UFAs at the end of the season, their combined cap hit comes in at 2.45. Ritchie's was a 2.5 when he was playing with this team. So we get back two players for the cost of what he was as the one. And on top of all of that, we absolve ourselves of another year of $2.5 million of Nick Ritchie. Whether or not he was playing in Toronto or he was playing with the Leafs or he was playing with the Marlies, MLSE was going to be paying him $2.5 million, and they were paying him 1.375 to sit on the AHL team and have 1.375 in the Leafs cap hit. So that is completely gone, and we get back two guys who, if it works out, hey, maybe you sign one or both of these guys in the offseason, and then you move from there. But that is very, very important to remember here is that Kyle Dubas, yeah, he made a mistake signing Nick Ritchie in the offseason, but he has completely absolved himself of that mistake and turned it into a net positive here on the other end of things. And when you look at the fact that they had to throw in a pick, I'm really not concerned about that. It is a 2023 or a 2025 pick, which, hey, maybe at those times we're going to be looking and going, maybe we want some more picks. But if that's the case, then you're trading players for picks, because if they're that value, if you need them that badly, then you need to make those moves to get those guys. We are in a win now situation. It's not this year's pick. It is next year's pick. It is 2025's pick, whatever they decide to choose. So I think that this is a positive trade on behalf of the Toronto Maple Leafs. But breaking down a little more of the stuff of what this results in for this team and what this might look like in the shorter term of things, Rasmus Sandin was sent down to the Marlies today in order to create the cap space for Dzingel and Lyubushkin to come in here. Keefe said Dzingel will go on waivers today, which he ultimately ended up doing. Sandin, obviously just a cap issue. He's expected to be back soon. Mrazek will start on Monday in Montreal, and Lyubushkin will meet the team in Columbus on Tuesday. So he will not be playing in tomorrow's game against the Montreal Canadiens. He will meet them on Tuesday. Unknown if he'll play yet, but it's unlikely considering he hasn't spent any time with these guys. But just how that's broken down. Dzingel, waivers. Sandin sent to the Marlies for cap stuff. Lyubushkin will join the team on Tuesday. Now, getting into Lyubushkin, because I think he's the bigger piece of this trade and ultimately the guy that we look at when you say what is the impact immediately right now coming into this team. Because you look at Dzingel, immediately waived the first day he gets here. It's unknown if he'll ever even put on a Toronto Maple Leaf uniform. The odds of him being claimed tomorrow are honestly much higher, above 50% than we're probably even giving it credit to.
I think so.
Yeah, so the odds of him even being here for by the time tomorrow night's game comes around, I think is pretty slim. So I'm not looking at that too much. I think if he does stick around, he's just a depth guy. He goes down to the Marlies, plays some games there. If you need a guy to come up, he's the guy that gets called because he moves ahead of guys like Nick Robertson or Joey Anderson or Kyle Clifford. He would be ahead of them on the depth chart, assuming he clears waivers. If he does not, goodbye. We're free of 1.1 million there as well, and we have more cap space. So Ilya Lyubushkin, if anyone was with us on the live stream last night, you would have heard me refer to him as the Russian Bear. Josh referred to it earlier in the show as well, and that's coming from Paul Bissonnette. He's an Arizona radio commentator. He's also the co-host of Spit and Chicklets podcast, and he is obviously entrenched in the Arizona Coyotes and what they're doing, and he tweeted, "Leafs fans are going to love the Russian Bear." So I did a little bit of research into this guy, Goody. I know we talked a little bit about him last night. 6'2", 200-pound right-handed defenseman. He's 27 years old, and he's currently in his fourth season in the NHL, coming from Russia, coming from the KHL. He's played his entire time with the Arizona Coyotes. He's never played an 82-game season, but this year has been the first year he's taken on a significant workload. He's been playing alongside Jacob Chychrun. 9 assists, 0 goals through 46 games played, 26 penalty minutes, and a -6 so far this season. I mean, it's kind of hard to look into some of those stats too much because when you're playing in Arizona on a team like that, it's hard for anybody to have any individual success. But how do you feel about adding Ilya Lyubushkin here, and what do you think his fit is going to be on this team?
Definitely not needing to get points. I mean, I'm sure he will occasionally, but looking at his points line won't tell you a whole lot. And looking at his plus minus will be slightly misleading because he's playing in Arizona. I love this deal. And I think that we're not in here looking for a top defenseman. I mean, getting one would be nice, but we know the reality. We sent out Nick Ritchie. Getting back any kind of value at this point is just really gravy. So I think that, I mean, you throw the pick in there, of course you want something, but The reduced cap space is huge for this team because we're pressed in that financial situation. And this guy is really the answer to what we've been needing on the blue line. We need a physical right-handed shot.
Yeah.
That's it. He doesn't need to be a guy who's even going to score 10 points this season plus postseason as a Leaf. We don't even need that. Of course, it'd be nice. It would probably make sense if he's playing at his best. But what I want from him is solid defensive play, few mistakes, some speed and physicality, and that's it. And I think those are pretty easy things to deliver on based on his reputation.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a good fit here too. The other thing I looked at when I was looking at, oh man, this guy in his first season, he was a -9. Then he turned it into a +4, which obviously is good. But then he goes -13 last year, -6 so far this year. He's added up a little bit more penalty minutes than he's averaged in the past few seasons. He's sitting at 26, and the most he had in a season before was 18. So he's obviously showing a little bit more jam, a little bit more physicality in there. But one thing I think is important to remember, even especially if you're going to dive into that -6 or you're going to wonder his fit here in Toronto, what is going to be asked of him is going to either be the fourth defenseman as the right-handed defenseman playing alongside Muzzin, or the sixth defenseman, 5th/6th, however you want to rank them, playing alongside likely Rasmus Sandin in that bottom pair. He has played most of this season as the first pair guy alongside Jakob Chychrun, shouldering large numbers of minutes, playing against top talent from the other teams. And oh, goody, by the way, you mentioned how he's a physical guy. 94 hits this year. That number coming into Toronto leads all Toronto defensemen in hits this season. Which I know you can't necessarily look at Toronto and go, oh my God, this guy's coming in here and he hits more than the guys in Toronto, because it's not like guys in Toronto hit. But yeah, still, the fact that we're bringing in a guy who hits more than any of these guys, has more hits so far this season than anyone, I think is a good factor. And you can't just look at a guy and go, man, he hits, we need that. He has to bring other things along with it. But when you're talking about defensive play, physicality, being big and mean, 6'2", 200 pounds, he's hitting more than anybody on the Leafs right now, and he's going to get more sheltered minutes in the second or third pairings alongside those guys. I think that this is going to be a good fit for him. And the last thing I'll say kind of before I hand it off to you here is, you think about him playing with a younger guy in Jakob Chychrun and having to learn that. He's going to come here and probably be in a situation to play against Rasmus Sandin, another younger guy. Whether or not he can hold those guys up, or if those guys have to hold him up, like whatever, I'm not really concerned about that. It's more of the familiarity with playing with a young, mobile, puck-moving defenseman who is also learning the game, or learning the NHL game. And I think that that's a good factor to bring in here. It's one of those kind of just small, untangible things where you look at and you're like, all right, he's played with another younger guy. He played against top pairing, or he played top pairing minutes. Now he's going to come here, get sheltered minutes, and play with another younger guy. There will be a little bit of familiarity.
I was actually going to say that it is nice to know he's coming from a situation where in some regards he's already had to be like the mentor, and not to a certain, like not to a crazy extent or anything, but still he's had to play with a young puck moving defenseman. Like he's comfortable, at least like in theory, in that situation. So I think that's definitely just a nice add-in factor to what makes this deal so good for the Leafs. Yeah. Ilya Lyubushkin is going to be an exciting player for us. He's bringing a little bit of everything that we've wanted, and these hopeful leadership traits. I'm assuming you can't help but develop a few of them playing alongside younger kids in Arizona. There's some controversy that comes with that as well. I feel like when you take a player out of a situation like Arizona and give them a fresh breath and allow them to play winning hockey, you're going to get the best out of them. It'll be like, I think that players down there can get a little bit down on themselves and in the whole environment. He's going into a hockey crazed market where people are going to be excited to have him there every single night, and they're going to be winning hockey games. I think it's going to generate a lot of momentum for him, and I think he's going to be really eager to fit this role because, as I said before, we aren't asking much. Like we're definitely within his capabilities for what we're asking, and playing in a team's top four in a losing environment, I understand why he's a dash, even though it's not good to see. It wouldn't really make sense to see him as like a plus at all.
No, it wouldn't. And I went looking to try to figure out exactly what type of player this guy is. I've heard of him. Like, I'm not going to lie and sit here and tell you I'm an expert on Ilya Lyubushkin. but I had heard of him mostly just through listening to other shows or having caught highlights and stuff, seeing him out on the ice. But I wasn't too familiar with who he was as a player, so I spent a lot of today doing some deep dive into him and what he represents. I read some articles, and I came across one from Jonas Siegel in The Athletic. It outlined a lot of his advanced analytics and kind of what he brings defensively. But one of the big things that he had said in the article that I read today basically entailed him saying, Lyubushkin, and quotes, checks out defensively, whether that be through the eye test or whether it's through the analytics, the advanced analytics that are given on him. He's not going to blow you away with numbers, or his analytics aren't like crazy. He's not shutting down everyone there is. But when you consider him coming into Toronto and playing in probably the bottom six, it's going to be lighter minutes. He's going to be playing against lesser opponents than he was playing against in Arizona in the top pairing. I think a guy like that could fit in here very nicely. And I mean, you look at it too, he's 94 hits. He's going to lead all Leafs in hits as soon as he gets here. He blocks shots. He's a physical guy. He's taking more penalty minutes, which hopefully he's not going to be taking on disciplined penalties, but he's clearly a guy who's going to go out there and make some noise, at least with his size, his physicality, and be able to impose himself on some other guys. And the biggest bonus, I guess, of all of it, he's a right-handed shot.
Yeah. Well, that to me is a huge redeemer here. And I'm going to come out with a hot take. I know TJ Brody has way more responsibility, but I feel like fans in Toronto are going to start looking at him in a similar light, where it's like you don't measure him in stats ever, but you can develop a crazy appreciation for this player just by being rock solid.
I was wondering where you were going with that, but yeah.
Yeah, I genuinely think that he's going to be in some regards better than TJ Brody, and take that with a complete like grain of salt here. Like, I'm not saying in terms of like career consistency or, like who they are. And like, I'm just saying he's going to look better out there, I think, than TJ Brody. And
why do you think that? Why do you think that? Like, in what way?
Just because TJ Brody doesn't do anything that special, right? But we have a crazy appreciation for him because we want someone that plays a humble defensive game. If he comes in here and immediately does the same thing, which isn't hard to do, then I think fans are going to be blown out of their socks. Like, I just feel like immediately it's going to stand out as like, holy crap, like this is the way a team should be built. We've struggled to find guys who are really, defensive minded and puck moving, like, and fast. Like, we've had Roman Polak, we've had Jake Muzzin, who isn't the best puck mover. We have a tough time finding in-betweener defensemen. Even Morgan Riley doesn't really bang a whole lot. Finding a guy like Ilya Lyubushkin, who was like a bit of like not playmaking, sorry, not of that at all really, but good puck moving ability. He can hang out in the top four, and he's just going to give you a right-handed depth. I feel like the bar is so low that he is going to blow fans in Toronto out of the water. I agree with Paul Bissonnette here, and it's bad for me to be overly optimistic as a Leafs fan, because I mean, you may as well expect little, but I'm coming out with the hot take and saying fans are going to appreciate him just as much as like a TJ Brody, I think, come playoffs.
Fair enough. I don't know that he'll be better than TJ Brody. I don't know if I'm ready to jump onto that. I understand what you're saying in terms of the respect of, go ahead.
TJ Brody's going to look worse because he's facing first liners. I think Ilya Lyubushkin's just going to like stand out in people's mind as like, wow, this guy's really carrying the blue line right now, because he's not going to be playing against the other team's best matchups like TJ Brody will. And I think that he's going to be doing a similar role to TJ Brody. It's going to be a perception thing I'm talking about. I just think that he's going to ace the test.
Okay. Fair enough. Yeah. Thank you for clarifying. I get it. I get what you're saying now. Okay. So let's go into our projected top six here and how we're going to break this down. It's very obvious at this point, Riley, Brody are going nowhere. Jake Muzzin is probably not even able to be moved on from. I don't know how the Leafs would even swindle that if they were trying to get out of his contract or trade him. I don't know that you could get any sort of value back, and I still think that even when they're looking at him not playing his best, he still brings something to this team that's worth keeping him around for, so I don't see him being moved on from. Rasmus Sandin, I think, is another untouchable here. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe a Liljegren, Dermott, or Hall have looks at other teams, or other teams have looks at them, but I see the four guys that I had mentioned, Riley, Brody, Muzzin, Sandin, as being locks to be here. So, with that being said, my projected top six, what I would like to see come Tuesday if he plays, or whatever the following game is after that, would be Riley, Brody, Muzzin, Liljegren, Sandin, Lyubushkin. I think it works out based on handed of shots, and I think it works out based on the balance of play. You look at Riley, Brody. Brody is the defensive defenseman. Riley is an offensive guy. They're not moving apart. That's kind of become pretty obvious. Muzzin is going to be able to handle more of the defensive role. Liljegren can be the offensive side of that. And then you look at the bottom pair, and it's going to be relatively the same. Lyubushkin, defensive defenseman. Sandin, play your game, have some freedom, go do your things. Lyubushkin's going to be back there for you.
The only thing I have to say to that, Phil, is I think that you're going to see line 3 and line 2, or pairings 2 and pairing 3 switch. Because at that point,
I agree.
At that point, we might start playing Muzzin and Liljegren the least.
Yeah.
But like, I agree, those could be how they actually turn out. I don't mind the sound of those pairings either. I just think that playing Sandin with Ilya Lyubushkin, that might end up getting more ice time once it's all said and done in the playoffs.
Yeah, no, I actually agree with that. I could see a situation where they either play even minutes or Sandin Lyubushkin end up shouldering some more of that load there. But what I'm saying here is that Dermott and Hall are looking on the outside in. I think one of them will have to be traded in the near future here. One of them will have to be moved on from, whether it's for an upgraded player or it's just to free up some cap space, or they go and they get a forward or whatever they go get. Someone of those two, Dermott and Hall, will have to be moved on from. And the other thing that I'm going to say here is that if the Leafs so choose to go to a position where they put Lyubushkin alongside Muzzin and they move Liljegren down with Sandin, I highly, highly, highly doubt that they feel confident going into the playoffs having Sandin and Liljegren be a D pairing. So if they ultimately decide Lyubushkin needs to play alongside Muzzin, I do predict... This is like an official, I'm going to go out there and go out on a limb and predict this. And I don't know who the guy is. I cannot say who the guy is. I have no idea. I have some people in mind that I think they might shoot for. But I think that if you end up in a situation where Lyubushkin pushes up and he has to play with Muzzin, they will look to find a right-handed defenseman who can step up above Liljegren for the short term. I think that this Leafs team would love to keep Liljegren around long-term, want to see him develop, want to see him get into some playoff games. But for the immediate short term, if Lyubushkin can only play with Muzzin, or they want him to play with Muzzin, I think the Leafs will go out and acquire a right-handed defenseman to play alongside Sandin to step in above Liljegren, and Liljegren, will become the seventh defenseman here.
I don't disagree with that take, Phil. I don't. And I think that, last episode I was saying we're not in a bad situation, so let's not overreact and like push this team too drastically into a different outlook, even if we're praying it's going to be better. What I'm saying is, we do have a nice lineup right now. You could definitely make it better and closer to what the average contender looks like. But, I'm just reluctant to even roll the dice too heavily with our blue line because, I think that we can maybe find the answer in a very simple form. Like, we're not looking out for anything too crazy. Yeah. But I'm pretty comfortable with with the way the team looks right now. I know that your big hunch is that there's big things still going to happen to this team. And I don't rule that out. I definitely don't. But I'm at least in a situation where I feel like we've already taken something very good and made it a considerable little bit better now. And I'm like pretty pleased. But then again, I'm not truly going to be pleased until we make it out of the first round. So we'll see what it takes to do that. But I'm not sold really in any direction at the moment. But I definitely can live with the team staying close to what it looks like right now.
Fair enough. All right, well, last thing I'm going to talk about before we let everyone go here is Kyle Dubas had comments today about Nick Ritchie and about his time here in Toronto. He said they obviously hope that it would play out differently. Everyone involved had thought things would be different when they signed him in the offseason and hoped for better things. He said that Ritchie missing chances earlier in the year affected his confidence and the chemistry with the players around him. Then you saw a situation where Bunting steps up and he solidifies himself in the top six on that first line. And Kerfoot ends up playing really well alongside John Tavares, which ultimately pushed Ritchie out of that top six. And then he wasn't able to find his way in there, which, this is something we all saw, but Dubas did address it today. And Goody, the final thing that he said in closing remarks about Nick Ritchie is he said, "And that's the way she goes. Sometimes she goes. No way. Sometimes she doesn't."
You're kidding me. He said that.
That was in the written transcript I read from his press conference today.
He's paraphrasing the Trailer Park Boys.
Yeah.
It's the way of the road.
It's the way of the road. Yeah.
Dude, that is insane that he just said that. My respect for Dubas is just like up here now. Wow. He's
Yeah.
making all the right moves.
Yeah, so watching him make those moves, the comments he made today about Nick Ritchie, I mean, it's something everybody saw, but then I also look at this and I go, this guy got out of this situation, no salary cap retained. You got back 2 players who can play this season. Obviously, Dzingel gets waived. He might move on to another team. I would not be surprised. If he doesn't, he's a depth piece for Toronto coming down the stretch and into the playoffs. It's nice to have that guy sitting there. If he moves on, if he moves on from Toronto, it's not a big deal. We ultimately free up $1.1 million in cap space that we can use to go and acquire somebody else, bring Sandin back up, move this lineup forward. Like, there's some good things to come out of this. You also add a big right-handed defenseman who can play in your bottom 6, who's been playing top pair minutes all season long. We only give up 1 pick ultimately to do this. And I mean, when you look at this, Goody, yeah, we traded Nick Ritchie, but this guy had no future playing for this entire rest of the season and likely not next year. So we basically look at a situation where Kyle Dubas traded a conditional second-round pick for 2 players who are going to be playing this season. And the bonus, because I mean, I'm obviously overlooking the fact that Nick Ritchie was traded, but the bonus is that we also absolved ourselves of $2.5 million of cap space this year and next season. So ultimately for me, this trade on Dubas's end was, I'm going to give it like an A. I don't know if I can give it A+ right away. Hopefully Lyubushkin works out here and things go well with him in Toronto, and we'll see what happens with Dzingel ultimately on the waiver wire. But for me right now, this is an A for Dubas. I'm happy with this trade.
Oh, it's an A from me as well when grading this one on Dubas's end. I love the way this trade went down because let's be real here. He made a mistake in signing Nick Ritchie. We had to deal with that, even though when you look at the trade on the surface of it, you want to evaluate it just in terms of assets. But the reality is we had to get rid of cap.
Yep.
So there is some benefit alone in doing that, like a big benefit.
Yeah.
And then you get back, I mean, Dzingel at worst or some cap space. I mean, you'll take Dzingel as depth if he does clear waivers. But then also looking at Ilya Lyubushkin, think about it. When you have a 2nd-round draft pick, like, of course they can turn into crazy things. Really in the NHL draft, you can find a player anywhere. But in the 2nd round, especially, I feel like if you look at what Ilya Lyubushkin's going to do for this team, ideally, if he can go out there and play like solid and like, you know, I guess he'd be in the bottom 4 of the pairing, but like go in there and be a really impact guy there. I mean, there's your 2nd-round draft pick. That's just like getting a guy that you hit on in the 2nd round, but who's a part of your team right now. That's a fair trade. It is a fair trade almost even without needing to offload the cap space. So I love it from all angles.
Yeah, well, that's a good way to look at it also, is you give up that pick for a guy who's going to help you right now. So I think that's a good thing to keep in mind. But Leafs fans, let us know in the comments what you guys think about this Nick Ritchie trade. How did Kyle Dubas do? What grade would you give him on this trade? What was the execution level? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure you like this video, and if you have not already, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We're on the road to 2,000 subscribers, so thank you guys so much for following along. And if we hit 2K before the playoffs, we're going mullets for the playoffs, so make sure you hit that subscribe button. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Let us know your thoughts on this trade. We will be back tomorrow night after the Leafs game against the Montreal Canadiens, February 21st at 7 p.m. You guys can find us on this channel after the game, reacting to the game. So Leafs fans, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We will see you guys in the near future. Keep believing.
Signing off.